I'm Terry Kolath, and I'm here today with J. Kelly Wright, a resident of the Estuary and a regular presenter in the Academy of Lifelong Learning. This time, we're going to be looking at the Second Amendment. Thank you for joining me, Jay.
You're welcome.
It's always a pleasure to learn from you. I think we all are just so pleased that someone with your background, clerking for a Supreme Court justice, a lawyer, would help walk us through some of the issues that are blaring at us from social media and the news, our televisions, and of concern to all of us, especially when we've seen the mass shootings that just break our hearts in the United States, and we wonder, how can this happen? What do you think?
Yes. The papers, it seems like every day, are talking about guns, gun crimes, gun use, gun control, and gun rights. And it usually doesn't take long before the Second Amendment comes up. And I learn a lot from giving the presentations because it forced me, in this case, to study some things I didn't know. And the Second Amendment is, well, it hasn't changed throughout the life of the Constitution, but its interpretation has changed very dramatically in this century.
Is it such concern to us because we have to worry about guns now? We can be surprised about guns. I shared with you that I was shocked the other night when a place of business, I was leaving late at night, and the person said, "That's okay, I've got my pistol." And I was like, shocked. I mean, we don't even know where guns are around us. And you see the craziness on the road. It seems like people lose their tempers. It's very, very frightening.
It certainly comes to people's attention because of misuse. But another reason for the controversy over the Second Amendment is that for most of the 20th century, a good many people didn't take it seriously. It's an unusually worded amendment. It starts off saying a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. We'll stop there for a minute. It's the only part of the Constitution that starts with that kind of purpose language. Now, the militia were very important around the time of the Revolution and around the time of the Constitution. The militia were the Minutemen, had weapons, drilled and trained in weapons, and that was the basis of the army that General Washington put together to fight the American Revolution. So preservation of the militia was very much on the minds of the people who wrote the Constitution and then the Bill of Rights. But fast forward to today, we don't have militia anymore. We do have a standing army, which was greatly feared by the Revolution generation. Their only model was the British Army, which was an instrument of terrible oppression to them. So they wanted the preservation of a citizen army as an alternative.
Interesting.
But we've moved beyond that.
Right.
And so really for most of the 20th century, a lot of people said, well, this Second Amendment thing, it's about militia, which we don't have. It's just a relic of a couple centuries ago. But the words don't stop there. They go on and say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And through much of the 20th century, and certainly the Supreme Court supported this interpretation, people read the entirety and said, well, yeah, that was so they could have weapons if there was a militia. But since we don't have a militia, this really isn't a modern concern. And in response to the problems that you've discussed, over time, restrictions on guns, gun ownership, gun use, tightened over time. Till really in this century, a gentleman named Dick Heller, who lived in Washington, D.C., he was, interestingly, a security police officer at the courthouse, and he had a gun every day in his job, obviously trained, a professional law enforcement officer, but he had to leave it in the courthouse when he went home. And he said, I want a gun, I want a pistol in my house for self-defense. About this time, there was a group of scholars who thought, well, we should take another look at this thing called the Second Amendment. And to fast forward to the end of the story, we'll talk about this more in the presentation. The Supreme Court ruled in 2008 that even though we don't have militias, the Second Amendment carries a personal right at least to have a gun in your house for self-defense. But the notion of total disarmament is now, in the Supreme Court's words, off the table. So that's where we are today. How we got there is what I'll talk about.
Well, there may still be room in this class. As a reminder for those of you who did sign up, and if you're interested and have not signed up, check at any concierge desk. We are looking forward to spending this hour and a half with J. Kelly Wright, looking at the Second Amendment and gun control, the right to bear arms in the 21st century.